That's awesome. How was Beetlejuice?
It was really good. It's a tight 100.
Hmm.
Fucking return with a V. I was stoked. It kind of suffers slightly from that thing that modern films have of having like so many plot
Mm-hmm.
lines. Whereas like I'm not sure you need this many, but like go for it,
Mm-hmm.
King, or whatever the shit. But a delightful romp. Nice and weird. Really, really fun to see Mr. Keaton
Yep.
back at it.
Yeah,
When
he seems to be having fun in the pictures.
Yeah, like looks good. Danny DeVito, our comrade, for a moment. We love to see Danny
Yeah.
DeVito. Catherine O'Hara's great in it. You know, sets. Remember
Nope.
sets? I know, right? It's like fucking wild to just see something with sets, and it's like the old claymation Tim Burton gags and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that, where I was like, fuck yes, give it to me. Like, give me that janky shit. I don't want to see any fucking, like, actual special effects. I want to, like, if I swear to fucking Christ, if you don't claymate a sandworm right now, I'm going to be pissed. Right? So, it delivers on all of those things. A kooky little autumn treat, I say.
Nice.
Goth Girl hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, recommend.
I saw Beetlejuice when I was a kid, and I think a lot of people really liked it. And for whatever reason, when I was a kid, I was just like, I don't like this movie.
Nice. Okay.
I don't know why. I don't have anything against Michael Keaton or anything. I don't really have anything against the movie. I just like it was never one of my things. But I'm glad people like it. I like Michael Keaton. I like Winona Ryder. She should get more work.
She really
Yeah.
should. She really should. Yeah. I was just happy to see her beautiful face, large and luminous.
Yeah, I think
You
I
know?
think Jenna Ortega is a pretty good actress too. The younger woman who's in
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The new goth
Yes,
princess.
yes, yes.
Every generation we must crown a new goth princess. It was Winona Ryder, then it was Christina Ricci, and now it's Jenny Ortega.
Christina
And
Ricci.
I,
There's a name.
oh, you
Oh
remember?
yeah, I had a huge
you know,
crush on her.
yeah.
Huge.
Obviously you did. Obviously you did. She's the original big titty goth girlfriend. Like just
Indeed.
that's it's true. That's just true.
Indeed.
She's what everyone's picturing in their head when they say big titty goth girlfriend.
Yep.
So, like we love Winona, obviously, but you can't call her a big titty goth girlfriend. She's a waif goth girlfriend. She's a waif goth girlfriend.
Yeah. Oh, I also heard the way that they handled Jeffrey Jones not being back because he's a gross and awful pederast.
Pedo.
Is they they had like a puppet like
Yeah.
kill his character, like bite him in half or something. I was like, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Because, like in the Beetlejuice afterlife, a lot of the time you look like however you died. And he got bitten in half by a shark. So that's how they handled it, And it worked. It worked out well. Like Blair in the movie theater's like, why isn't he in it? I was like, I will talk to you about this when we get home.
Not right now, like because like that's
I'm not gonna be like you cannot go look at the controversies section of his Wikipedia right now.
every like because there's no way to like communicate like he was canceled. Okay, well like did he like did he like make advances on like a co-star, like inappropriate advances? No.
Nonsense.
Yeah, and then you have to like whisper talk like he was noncing. What? He's a pedophile. What? He's a pedophile, and you're like people are like,
I'm just
oh,
not. I just
like,
not.
no, we'll just don't worry about it. It really doesn't matter for the purposes of this. Let's just.
Let's just say, he sleeps with the fishes. I mean, no, etc.
I'm going to SeaWorld. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh God. Yeah. Well, I'm glad
But
you liked it. I'm glad it's back, and I'm glad people like it again. Just one of the. You know how like there are like movies from childhood where like it comes up and people are like, "This is my favorite fucking thing ever," and you're just like, "I remember that." I mean, I'm happy for you. Like it's like
yeah, for sure. I'd say
it's like people who are really, really, really into Transformers. And don't get me wrong, I had a lot of Transformers action figures and stuff, and I saw the cartoon and everything when I was a kid. But like, I'm talking people who are like super duper into it, and so like when a new movie comes out, they're like, "Yeah, this is gonna suck," but like still, and I'm like, "Huh." I always forget that people really like Transformers.
Yeah, see, that's an interesting one to me because it's like I feel as though like the thing I was the most hardcore about, unfortunately for everyone, was like I was like a Tolkien nerd, and that was like my hardcore thing. So I got it out of the way at like a pretty good. Like, I mean, I can be pissed off about The Hobbit now, but when I'm doing it, it's cool. Like I said, like when I'm doing it, it's so much nerdier, and it doesn't like I can't. Not that I would do that, but I lack that thing that people have about like, oh, this is going to destroy this nostalgic thing from my childhood, because I don't really have a nostalgic thing like that I was like super duper into, other than Lord of the Rings. And of course, I've got my complaints about that and the depiction of Faramir, but like that's it is what it is, right? So
Yeah, no, I just like I don't have that like I don't know, it's like I'm like maybe like time will do that to almost anything. Like time will like age it and change it in your mind and warp it into things. But like I, they could like you could like you could take Star Wars in like a million directions and like things that I don't agree with, and they have like both when Lucas was running it and now that Disney like they do that shit all the time, and it's just like that's fine. That's never going to get rid of how I feel about The Empire Strikes Back or
yeah.
Knights of the Old Republic, or like I feel ways about those things, and like I can watch them or play them or something like that, and like feel that again. And someone now being like, this sucks, or like, they take the franchise or whatever in ways that I don't like. Which I mean, they weren't taking my advice in the first place, so like I don't know why they would start now. But I'm just like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, I mean. It's like I wouldn't have made Luke and Leia brother and sister. Like, I mean, if I was running it, but like like okay, that happened before I was born. Literally, I was born like 4 months after that happened. Like, there's literally nothing I will, or ever could do about. Like it's just like,
no, quite so. I mean,
it's all of these things are marred human constructions in the first place. None of them are perfect. It doesn't matter how much I like it or how much I get into it. There's no part of me that ever goes, oh, everything that's ever come into this is absolutely perfect in every way. And agrees with my headcanon in every way. It's not possible. There's nothing that could ever do that. And if it did, your mind would immediately freak out, because you'd be like, oh, I'm really in a simulation. This is real true shit.
I know, right? Which is quite funny, because like that's one of the things they claim AI is going to do, which it's obviously not. But hey, yeah. Like, I mean, I don't know. I suppose from a leftist perspective as well, I just I think that nostalgia isn't useful. I don't think it's like a leftist. I don't think it's like a compatible like that kind of overt, aggressive nostalgia for what ultimately is a consumer product or something like that. I don't think is useful. Now you can go ahead and enjoy it, like obviously I'm out here enjoying, but I'm like, if we're getting violent, if you're out here like those like those dumb motherfuckers who are like, you ruined my childhood because they made a Ghostbusters with ladies in.
Yeah.
It's like that sort of thing is incompatible with the movement, I would argue.
Well, yeah, no doubt. I would say that I think that once you do that, that probably like moves beyond nostalgia, because nostalgia is just a like it's a common feeling we all have. There's not a person alive, anyone that, even the coldest, hardest motherfuckers who ever lived were not free of nostalgia, because you can't be like you see something from when you were a kid or a better time in your life or something, or when your mom or dad were still alive or whatever, and you feel that pang in your heart or that little thing, and you're like, okay, yeah, but like that, and that is like, that's just a human emotion. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
It's not good or bad intrinsically. But when you take it from something like that and you turn it to this reactionary intent that like it has to be the way I say, in my mind, it has to like appeal to like all of these like factors up and down the board, and like it has to be reactionary across like that. To me just moves it in, that just moves it into like a reactionary hostility to art type thing.
Yeah.
Almost more than, nostalgia, which I mean, like, I know like nostalgia is shorthand for like a lot of stuff, but like I'm just like, nostalgia is more of a fact of life. It's like oxygen, kind of like, yeah, it's, it's there. It could be used to bad ends, if somebody takes, you can't have fire without oxygen, but
Quite.
I mean, that's my thing on it. But yeah, like anybody who's acting like that, absolutely not. That's not compatible. Like, that's not forget leftism for a second. Forget Marxism. That's not even compatible with just like being a normal functioning member of society.
Yeah, that's
like how could you like how can you do that? Like, oh no, it has to be like this, and it can't be woke, and you're just like, what? Like you are pushing back against like the grain that society is going, like massively, like social and cultural forces that you can, and you're just like, no, it has to be like when I was a kid, and you're just like,
grow up.
Yeah,
Literally grow up.
and
I
you
guess.
can tell it's not nostalgia for the thing. It's nostalgia for this warped idea of it, because like most of these things like have been woke since since whenever. Star Wars had black actors in the 80s. It had a heroic female in the first fucking movie. Like, Leia's the one who gets them out of a bunch of shit in that. She's shooting the guns a lot and telling Han that he's a dumbass, which he is, and Luke. But like, it's just like, this stuff is like, that's there. That's in the movie. If that's in a movie today, you're like, that's woke.
It's woke nonsense.
Feminist bullshit. It's just like, okay, man, cool. I don't like whatever.
I can't.
At that point, I just like check out, because I don't consider that like a productive or even remotely good faith conversation to have. So I'm just like, yeah, okay, you're an idiot. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah, I'm like, I would be very excited to laugh at Chuds online who want to say that like Beetlejuice is woke or something. No, that would be very funny to me though.
How is it not?
I would just like to see what it was. I'm just interested. I'm sure that someone's out there saying it. That's just the law of the internet.
We got to start, but I saw this thing, and it was like it's like this like Google Doc that some of these idiots are passing around, and it's like which video games are woke and which are, and it's like like Elden Ring, Dark Souls, all that stuff is woke because it doesn't, because like it's like, yeah, gender doesn't matter, like it,
be it like play as a girl if you want.
Yeah, play it. Yeah, whatever. And other stuff, like, other like normal stuff. You'd like, oh, this has a strong female character, whatever. And then Civilization 6 is on there, and I'm like,
what?
Okay, why? And it's like climate change themes. I'm like, okay, I guess. Sure, because like, the as you move on, there are like modes where like you can have apocalypse mode where the world gets just worse and worse, and there are like volcanic destruction and meteors, whatever. And then it was like includes unimportant females as lead throughout history as leaders, and I was like,
oh
dog, y'all are like, what are we doing? Like, what the fuck is this? Like, what are we doing here? I don't.
Putting Mario 2 on the woke list because you can play as the princess.
Probably. I didn't look through. I wasn't gonna spend any time doing that shit. But like, yeah, probably. Like, oh man. All right. Anyway, let's talk about
royalty.
let's talk about some royals. All right. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello. Welcome back to We're Not So Different, a podcast where we are always happy to spotlight unimportant females throughout history. I'm just kidding, of course. There are no unimportant females.
That's right.
Especially not the girl
As
listening
to this. No, she's not.
Nope. I beat you to it. Ah!
Damn, he got my ass.
Yep. All right, here we go. Yeah, my name's Luke. That is Dr. Ellen Rianiga. You know the deal. I am the idiot. She's the savant, or whatever. Here we go. Before we get to our main part of our show today, which is a day in the life of a royal. Before we get there, we got questions from patrons. First one from Dog Spotter, who says, "What's the most useless language you can have a child grow up with in a Western country, provided you have $20,000 to $40,000 in tutor fees? For example, I assume a child can't be a Linear B native speaker."
See, I've really been twisting myself in knots with this, like as a noted minority language liker, right? And so there are certain things that I would say we're going to immediately cross them off the list because I think that there's a real utility in learning languages that are particularly under threat.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was about to say, because like I have a threshold question here, because like any language that is extinct or near extinct or something like that, learning that is insanely important.
Yeah, so, exactly. So it's like, so for example, I am a huge fan of anyone learning Native American languages. Like what's like like an emergency, we need to start doing that now. You know, like learning any of the Native or Aboriginal Australian languages. Let's do that immediately. Irish emergency, Scottish emergency, Cornish emergency, Breton emergency. Right? Like we've got we need to like get the Basque. Let's fucking go. Let's learn some Basque, you know. So,
that's a language isolate. We have to preserve that shit at all costs. We have no idea where it came from.
Exactly. So, you know, there are really important cultural reasons why we want to learn things like that, right? And then, like, some of the dead languages, I think, are still really good. Like, obviously, I'm going to tell you that it's a good idea to learn Latin because, you know, you learn Latin. Number one, you can do medieval history, but number two, it helps learning other Romance languages. And like I was almost going to be like Sanskrit, except for there is like a lot of documentation in Sanskrit, so I can't say that. Anyway, racking my brains, and you know what I've decided?
What?
Esperanto. Do you know what Esperanto is?
I do, yeah. Okay, I can see that. Yeah, like, okay.
And the reason why I'm saying Esperanto is because since I think it was invented in like the 70s or 60s, like that, and it wasn't taken up. And it's the non-taking upness that you can do it. Now, of course, you could also within this, like say some like of the imaginary languages, like I am sorry if you've decided to learn Dothraki. You fucked up, right?
Yeah.
Like High Valyrian, Dothraki, Klingon, fucking Elvish. No, don't do that. Don't. I would say don't do that. I would say that there is a precious and limited amount of time on this earth, and like fictionalized languages, are just not the way to use that part of your brain. Unless you've got like endless hours in the day or whatever, and this is what you do. But it's like, please do not spend 20 to 40K in tutor fees on a Klingon tutor, you know? So like, but those are fictional, right? Whereas, I mean, to an extent, I guess you could make an argument that Esperanto is fictional. And I would be like, but they tried it. Those bitches tried it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Yeah.
saying Esperanto, mostly because I'm just like, I think that smaller languages always have this really like cool and nice utility,
Yeah.
elsewise. I mean, I will say that like, there are also certain things, and like, I learned this to my cost being a weeb, but like, I barely use Japanese. Like, I
Can you still read it?
I was never really all that good at reading because, like, I mean, if everything's in hiragana and katakana, that's fine. But I don't have like the 2000 kanji, which is like on me. Like
Can you
that's
speak it?
yeah, but it's like I can like have a conversation with you. Like I occasionally give tourists directions.
Huh.
I surprise and delight. White girl shocks Japanese restaurant, etc.
Insanely tall white
Yeah,
girl.
like it's like
They're like, she's tall and she speaks Japanese.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
like I will 100% occasionally shock a Japanese restaurant.
In the 1840s, they would have made you a god. No,
Yeah, I know, right? Like, so, but you would be surprised how little I use. Now, granted, it's because like my life is no longer such that I go to Japan a lot. But I also kind of felt like they were not like sometimes they loved that a giant white girl
Yeah.
was speaking Japanese, and sometimes it was just like really clear that they wished I rather hadn't. Right?
Yeah.
Like they were just kind of like, I just really wish foreigners would knock this shit off. Like
Yeah.
was kind of like a vibe that I got at times, and I was like, all
No, I
right.
got you.
Yeah. So it's like,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, I still think that there's utility in it because I think there's utility in learning like almost any language because it's good for your brain and it's fun, except for fucking Esperanto, which I can't.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I
Yeah.
think the answer's Dutch.
Get their asses.
Weeben Hyven problem. I don't fucking
With their
know,
swamp
man.
German.
Your swamp German. You like literally the only language I could think of that has like Star Wars naming or Star Wars writing conventions to do it. Like starts with a lowercase letter, then an apostrophe, then two uppercase letters, and then it goes and there's a dash in it, and you're like, yeah, cool. Is that the name of like a Bothan, or is that the name of a town like 20 minutes from Amsterdam? Like,
Yeah. It's funny,
Yeah.
and I do think that it's probably in the conversation because if you're gonna do that, like, just learn German, right? Like,
Yep.
you learn German.
Yep. Yeah.
But
and-
also, I just want to say,
Yeah.
do you know what the word for baseball is in Dutch?
No.
It's honkbal.
They're hunk.
Honkbal.
They're hunkable. I can't even do it. Yeah. Also, I would say if we split Brazilian Portuguese off for Portuguese, then Portuguese would also be a very useless thing to learn. No offense to Portugal, you're great. Just man, you guys really should
It's
have been
really
on the other side
hard.
of the Treaty of Tordesillas. I'm just saying.
I find it really difficult. I mean, I suppose that's just like Spanish speakers whiling out, but
Yeah.
every time I am confronted with it, I'm just like, I mean, I can read it okay, but like the minute they start speaking, I'm like, I don't understand
Nope.
how this is what, like, you can understand Brazilian Portuguese, like it makes sense,
Yeah.
but like Portuguese, I'm kind of like, I don't really understand how you're getting those sounds with these letters, but like
Yeah.
go off, kings and queens.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Next we got a question. Dog Spotter, thank you for that question. Next we got one from Michael Wright, who says, so you're on a road trip through the French countryside, and the inn you stop in boasts that they have a pot of perpetual stew that's been simmering since the 12th century. Do you have a bowl in it? Do you have a bowl of it?
Is this a fucking joke? Because obviously, I'm gonna eat that shit. Like, obviously,
I'm gonna eat that shit to see if it gives me powers.
Like, my thing, like, look, if that's how I die, that's how I die. All right? But yeah, maybe, who knows? Like, at any moment, I'll be like a knight or something. I will gain the strength of all the souls of those who put stuff into this pot.
Yeah, I do like the idea that they found, like, that this is, like, just, like, a real thing that is out there, and there's a shack that's been standing like in some forest since the 1200s, and people have just been coming to it, and they're like, the pot, the stew, it's still going, like it's no one's actually like tending it. It's just people come and drop stuff in it and take food from it. But like other than that, it's just like this stew. It never thickens to the point of anything. It's just perfectly. Yeah, I would eat the hell out of that.
I would eat that so fucking hard. Like, I
Give me
mean,
give me the French Brunswick stew. Yeah, if you're American, Brunswick stew is like just you're throwing a lot of shit in a pot. It's good though.
yeah, I mean, like, I think that I'm a really big fan of just throwing some stuff in a pot and seeing what happens. I think it's a great call. Great
It's
show.
very like there are going to be two outcomes to that. It's either going to be good or you're going to have a funny story. Be like, now we know not to mix
Real talk. Yeah.
beets and I don't know, lamb's blood. I don't know, whatever. You probably could actually mix it.
I bet that would whip. That'd go
Yeah,
hard,
yeah. Look, we know with me the riffs. We're talking like a 70-30 conversion rate. So we'll take what we can get here. Michael, thank you very much for the question. We would both partake in the perpetual stew, if only to see if it gave me the power to see through time or killed me or whatever. If you want to ask us questions like this that devolve into sheer madness, please subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/WNSDpod. There are well over 200 episodes of ad-free content between regular episodes and our bonus episodes. We have another bonus coming out later this week on The Name of the Rose. It's part 5. So yeah, we get to find out more about what those crazy monks are up to in the Italian Abbey. And check that out if you want to hear more about it. Or just help us out. $5 a month, patreon.com/WNSDpod. Anyway, on to the main show. So we spent the last 3 episodes going through a few patron episode requests and talking about a day in the life of a medieval peasant farmer, attorney knight, and a city-dwelling merchant. However, this presents a problem because we're now out of these day-in-the-lifestyle episode requests. But as you'll recall, this series was not randomly chosen by us, your hosts. It was ordained by the gods through their chosen vessels, the sacred chickens in my backyard. And the gods demanded a 5-episode series. That was both a part patron episode request and part day in the life. There's no either or about it. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying aloud, Luke, could it be possible that you just misread the auspices and interpreted the message of the gods incorrectly? Sadly, no.
No.
Don't get me wrong. It's a good suggestion. I am wrong about stuff a lot, but this message was unequivocal. I even consulted my friends in the augury group chat and the bigwigs down at the American Society of Augurers, Mystics, and Moonstruck Theorists, and they all agreed too. The chicken said the series must continue, so it will be done. But what other people can we do day in the life stuff for? We've already covered like 95% of the people on Earth during the Middle Ages, and we discussed peasant farmers. There weren't really a ton of professions at the time, so talking about merchants and knights covers a wide swath of what's left. But who else is there? Oh, right. Those fucking fat cat royals, the kings, queens, emperors, and empresses who spent their lives trying to find new inventive ways to acquire gout, inbreed, and generally sit around in the lap of luxury. We all know they're evil as a baseline, but even so, what the fuck did they do all day? I mean, even when we factor in a lesser number of waking hours than the medieval person had as compared to us today, royals would still have to find a way to waste at least 14 hours a day. They don't live on the existential knife's edge of life and death like most peasant farmers and lesser merchants did, where every day was filled with an overwhelming amount of backbreaking work that they had to be accomplished just to stay alive. They have fucking servants and everything's provided them, so then what do they do to stave off boredom and pass the time? I mean, like, really, like, that much boredom? That's just going to lead people to, like, I don't know, killing each other? Fighting? Fucking? I don't know. We'll find out. Well, let's find out together. We're going to discuss daily life at courts, both big and small, to find out what these lazy jackasses did all day while we were tilling fields or dodging brigands trying to sell wool 2 towns over. Yeah. So when we think about medieval royalty and their courts, we no doubt think of the lavish castles, massive lists of retainers, and courtly spectacle of the high and late Middle Ages. But there were several centuries before that wherein all of the hundreds of thousands of microstates and territories that dotted early medieval Europe, would each have their own royalty or some version of it. Eleanor, how was the early medieval court different than those that came after?
Size is like one big thing that is going to come into this, because until you consolidate a bunch of land, that also just means you can't steal from all of those peasants yet, so you're just going to be limited in terms of what your options are, right? There are exceptions to this. For example, the Visigothic kingdom on the Iberian Peninsula is pretty big. Some of the Roman successor states, like on the Italian peninsula, can be pretty sweet because they just like move right into Roman stuff, so like you're good, right? But basically, it's just a lot smaller. Another big thing to keep in mind here is that a lot of the time you're not dealing with stone buildings.
Yeah.
So, it's still kind of like pretty early on. So, if someone is like, hello, I am the king, they're in like a wooden long hall.
Yeah.
Which is sweet. I'm not saying that it isn't, but it's just like, when you're like, I'm picturing a king, it's like, sure, not the king of Northumbria, though.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to be what it is. You're also more likely to run into peripatetic kingship.
Yeah.
At this point in time. Not that, high and late medieval courts don't go on procession, because obviously they do, and they move around for fun. But earlier medieval kings are going to different places because, like, they're kind of going to a place, sucking them dry of all their resources, and then moving on.
Yeah.
So
that's a good way to keep people from gaining a lot of power against you, too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, for example, again, I'll keep using Northumbria just because I've spent a lot of time there, and, we know their early medieval kings, they kind of summer over near Adgefren. And they summer at Adgefren because they drive the cattle up from the plains, and they basically just barbecue all summer. So they're just like, yeah, this is where we go to like slaughter a bunch of cows and eat real good, and then we fuck off again, right? Like, because it's at pretty high elevations, so you go like back down into the lowlands for winter and things like that. So they're much more likely to be moving around.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, this doesn't apply to all of medieval Europe because, of course, Constantinople obviously had its lavish palace and everything. Like, it's, Justinian II was building like the Hagia Sophia back in like the late 500s. So, like there was opulence to be had, but for the most part, throughout the rest of Europe, it was not like that. So, we end up, with primogeniture a lot of ways, but like early on, these succession practices were not in any way set in stone. So like, were they just kind of like, strongest man wins, or, some of them were like, well, actually, I'm going to give it to my son or daughter, what are we doing here?
Real mixed bag is the answer. It's hard to kind of say, and even within kingdoms, you can have differing practices, is the thing. Now, I mean, the obvious thing to do is, like, pass it down to, like, whoever has a kid born first, like, right? Like, and that does tend to be something that most people are fighting for. They usually wish to have this kind of put down to their firstborn son. Occasionally we get some daughters in there. That does happen. However, because around in the early medieval period too, you still have rather a lot of concubinage happening. A lot of times, it's going to be the kid from your favorite wife.
Yeah.
And that does happen rather a lot. So, if people can have more than one wife, then they will often kind of pick and choose between those kids. There are times, though, as well, where people just kind of, like, are sensible and they choose just smart people instead, where it's like, oh, here's this guy from the court, I think he'll be all right. Especially if they have, like, real garbage dog shit children. Sometimes they'll just be like, nope. I do not think
Yeah.
so. Like this is not going to be happening here. But fundamentally, the way that marriage works as a political tool and the way that you use it to build consensus is predicated on the idea that any resulting children are going to come to rule. So, there's no point in being from Mercia and marrying someone off into Northumbria if you're not going to get a relative on the throne, right? Like it just wouldn't make sense. So within that, there are still some expectations that you're gonna piss people off if you are a king, you have a princess for a wife, and then you're like, actually, I like this woman who was enslaved, who is now my concubine better. So and people
Yeah.
do it. People absolutely do it, but you've got to be
Yeah.
prepared for pushback, is the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you gotta have the iron hand, or it's not happening. So yeah, like when I think about these lesser kings and stuff like that, I'm thinking of like you said, guys in longhouses, and it's like a guy and his queen and like his best warriors, and they're all drinking themselves silly while wearing like sheep's, or like thick wools and everything like that. So, but like when did like royal palaces start to crop up, at least outside of Constantinople and all that?
We start to see the ones at least the ones that really survive to us, start gaining traction in sort of the 8th and 9th centuries.
Okay.
So you'll start seeing a lot more stone stuff around the shop. Now, there's exceptions to this, especially on the Italian peninsula, because again, they're just like, I'm still in this castle. Kind of a deal. But you tend to start seeing, for example, this is when the 9th century is when you get Vyšehrad built in Prague. You see, like Charlemagne really does a good job in kind of being like, hey everyone, this is what we're doing now. We're building with stone. And
don't you love Aachen? And people are like, not fucking really, but okay.
I guess. Kind of a deal. You start to see more things like Dijon gets like good buildings around this time. There are exceptions to this rule. England, I'm looking in your direction.
Losers.
Fucking loser shit.
Losers.
And also fundamentally, a large part of the Viking world as well just kind of remains wooden, because again, you might need to move around a lot. So fuck it, they do. But these things kind of start compiling, like especially then when you hit the so-called Viking Age, if we want to call it that, there comes a larger interest in building out of stone.
Yeah, it doesn't burn as easily.
Because Vikings can't just roll up on your shit and burn things down. So there is a real vested interest in kind of throwing stuff up within that period, so that those guys in boats don't come burn everything down.
Yeah.
Repeatedly.
Yeah. I like. I think it's. I think it's interesting to you see the progression from the fall of Western Rome, and you got these guys who are just mostly pagan warlords. They rule territory through conquest, and then all of a sudden you just keep going, and you get to Charlemagne, and he just kind of starts formalizing and centralizing some of this stuff, and from there it just sprouts into all of these other things. But yeah, it's just over a 400 or 500 year period, you just see the entirety of Western and Central Europe, and a lot of Eastern Europe for that matter, assimilated into this practice, from warlords to converting to some kind of Christianity to now we got big stone buildings, and now we got hierarchies, and people are talking about divine right of kings and shit.
Yeah, for sure. It's a long process, right? This is something to keep in mind, is that it's an incredibly long span of time when we're talking about the medieval period. And there's a big difference in what 800 years can be, right? So we have to understand that these things kind of happen incrementally. So, like, the myth making behind what it means to be royal is a huge part of this. And sometimes when we look at it now, it kind of like collapses time, right? When you're like, oh, well, yeah, and then this happened, and, you know, they wrote about it in, like, this book, and this is their legend. You go, yeah, okay, fine, but I'm like, who believes this, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, that happened 300 years before. And so the process of repetition and the way that the world is basically metered out in order to tell certain stories repeatedly means that these things eventually come to fruition. So, you know, like building a ridiculous genealogy for your line. Like, right? So it's like the Chemyslids, for example, just because I will not stop talking about them. Like, their genealogy thing is that, like, Chemysil, who's like a plowman, meets a fairy queen called Libouja.
Yeah.
And then, like, so, like, they're part fairy. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, and everyone is all
Obviously.
like, and everyone's like, shut up, like, now, like, that's not real. It's like, yeah, okay, but they kind of know, but that's part of the myth making. And, like, everyone who's like, I'm actually related to Hector, we're Trojan, you know, like, all these things, you know, like, that repetition matters and it means something. Being able to just kind of, like, spout a genealogy means something. Being able to say, you know, son of, son of, son of, son of, son of, and kind of call out a very specific lineage helps to demarcate you out as someone who should be doing these things. You know, and that's oftentimes linked very specifically to, like, military conquest. There, you know, like, everybody wants to be like, oh yeah, this is how many degrees of separation I am from, you know, Rollo. Right? Because, you know, he did big things, right? So, or like, you find a fucking saint, and every royal family's got a goddamn saint.
Yeah.
Right? Like, not by accident. But you go, like, again, if you're Czech, you're like, yeah, well, I'm descended from St. Wenceslaus, so fuck you. Right? Like, so you have all of these ways of determining it, and it comes at you from a lot of different angles, and the secret ingredient here is just time.
Yeah.
You know? And soon you got him saying this is the way it's always been, right?
Yeah. I've talked about it before. I'm a huge fan of, like, dynasties that have, like, you know, the certificate of authenticity from, like, King Arthur or Julius Caesar or whoever. You know, like, look, this says we're, you know, from, you know, we're this is passed down from, like, Constantine or whatever. Like, yeah, okay, man, yeah,
sure,
like, yeah, you get like you kept this, like, tiny framed like, certificate the whole time. Okay, cool.
Cool.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, well, you know, that is early medieval courts and later in high medieval courts too, in some more outlying areas, but for the most part, you know, they adopted stone, they got bigger, the institutions became centralized, you know, and then they became countries, or at least loose affiliations of, you know, territories and states and everything like that. And bam, you get the courts that we think of with, you know, giant opulent palaces and everything. So, you know, I was going to come up with, like, some convoluted joke to make up a fake king and talk about their court. But the fact is that Eleanor happens to have a copious amounts of knowledge about the goings-on and inner workings of the court of Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV, who reigned from 1355 to 1378. Though this court is one of the most powerful to rule in Europe at any point during the Middle Ages, it should still provide us with an example of what happened on a daily basis at court. Eleanor, what the fuck were they doing? What the goddamn hell were you doing all day?
I'll tell you.
It's 3 p.m. You haven't moved yet. Your bed sores are disgusting. What the fuck?
Yeah, well, Charles IV, in addition to being my favorite, is one of our goutier emperors. So we picked a good one here. But yeah. So there are, of course, and I will flag them up, deviation points here. Because one of the things about Charles is he's an effective monarch. So this is what a day in the life of someone who actually gets shit done and isn't dog shit looks like. So one thing that everyone's going to have in common is the first thing that you're going to do when you roll out of bed in the morning is you're going to mass. Like that.
Every morning.
Every morning, you are going to your little chapel. You're gonna have your little private chapel, and you're gonna go have a little mass. That's like number one, numero uno, before you eat. You are going to go and you're going to go to mass, and my boy Charles.
Yep.
Was down there. He loved that shit. He was like, "Fuck yeah, mass! Can't wait to like rise and grind." Like, it's funny. It's very much like the equivalent now of like like those masculinity influencers who are all like, "Well, yeah, get out of bed and do your gratitude journal or like meditate masculinely in an aggressive way." Like, that they're doing that, but with mass, right? So first thing you do is you go to mass.
Yeah.
Then you eat. So then you kind of have a bifurcation here, because what you probably do, especially if you're younger after this, is train. So it's like out to the yard for you to go swing a sword around for a bit. This is 100% true for young men. For Charles, I mean, that all depends, right? Like, we know that he definitely sees battle action, especially with his father in Italy. But then by the time one becomes emperor, like, you don't always need to be doing all that, right? Like, you got a bunch of other people who might go do that for you. There's certainly military action for him, like even within Bohemia at the time, but he doesn't usually see a battlefield again. You kind of like, but it is something you kind of need to be doing, because for the great majority of people, this is going to come into play. These are those who fight. That's what they're for. And if you're the Holy Roman Emperor, you're going to at least have to like put up some training time, because like if you're not the secular arm of Christendom, if you're not prepared to ride into battle for God at any moment, who the fuck are you? So so you're probably going to do some training, right? Afternoon, then you usually shift over to doing business. Now, what that looks like can mean any number of things. You are probably, if you're Charles, going to be doing rather a lot. Like, I mean, you're probably meeting with your architects about what the fuck they're doing on the cathedral or the castle, or castles, as the case may be. Certainly, he's meeting with city planners to yell about walls and, what he wants built where. He definitely has meetings with other members of the nobility who he uses to do any number of things. Right? Sometimes he is sending them off on special errands. Occasionally he is working in order to ensure sort of stability on the roads. In Bohemia, this is a really big deal, is trying to make sure that the flow of commerce can continue, and his dad did a shit job of that. So, like, he's really all about that kind of a thing. And Charles is really into legal shit. So he's probably meeting with legal advisors a lot. His legal advisors can be any number of people. He's incredibly tight with the archbishops, like especially Janusz Vlazim. And these guys can give you specialist kind of legal advice in addition to theological advice. And he uses that for all kinds of shit. Like in order to make, for example, the Golden Bull of 1356, where he tries to sever the church from the process of Holy Roman Imperial coronation. He does this in Bohemia with a set of laws that he makes called the Majestas Carolina. So this is kind of like a specific sort of high/late medieval thing, though, as well, because legalistics can really vary, especially in the Holy Roman Empire. You have a lot of what we call customary law, where it's just like, yeah, homie, this is how it's always been done, and it's not fucking written down, right? Yeah. And Charles is like, I don't know, homie, I thought maybe we should write it down. And by the very process of writing it down, what he does is he consolidates a lot of power underneath himself, that the nobles are like, I think the fuck not. Like, I think you'll find that is my job, so you don't do that. And he, like, loses this battle, right? Yeah. But it is, like, a physical and legal battle that goes back and forth. So at any point in time, he's going to be meeting with, I don't know, the Rosenbergs to get screamed at. Right? Like, and so you're gonna get fucking screamed at, right? Planning trips, if you're like involved in peripatetic kingship, which he is because he's a good emperor, he's moving around all the fucking time. It's like a homeboy got to go down to Nuremberg. He's going over to Avignon. Like, he's checking in on Milan. All these places. If you want to rule them, you've got to show the fuck up. And so that is a matter of moving things around.
Mm-hmm.
If you are less of a diligent ruler, let's just say, there are other options for how you could be filling your afternoon. One of the big ones is hunting.
Yeah.
These motherfuckers love to hunt.
Yeah.
That is like their number one. It is their video games. And so like a lot of the time they will just go the fuck out and hunt.
Yeah.
You might also like go hawking.
Yeah.
That's like a really big one. So like hawking, hunting, things of this nature, like playing silly buggers, they do a lot of that. Right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like the worst kind of royal all morning in the yard just hacking at things, like practicing jousting or whatever, and then in the afternoon just hunting. And there's a lot of fucking complaints about this. We know that there like tons of people are like this.
Yeah.
And we know that just because everyone is like, Jesus Christ, could we just like get some safety on roads, like a crumb of security? And everyone is like, no, right. Then you hit evening. If you're the right sort, you go to church again. Just like a little cheeky double church.
Oh, yeah. Gotta slip off for a double church. It's like, man, what a life.
Mm-hmm. They love that shit, This is probably going to be like a less drawn out version of like your like major mass thing is going to be kind of like in the morning, but then like you might just like have some prayers, a little singy song, maybe like doing some reading, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then you go to dinner. Dinner's probably going to be pretty fucking sweet.
Yeah.
Like one way or another. You're going to eat a lot and you're going to drink a lot. And now you might do some fun things after dinner or before dinner as well. So this is when, and also you get a little bit of this in the afternoon, but we certainly know that it happens in the evening when you don't want to be outside, right? So this is when you do your singing.
Yeah.
This is when you do your storytelling. This is when the jongleurs come in,
Yeah.
A lot of playing chess.
Mm-hmm.
These hoes love chess.
Yeah.
So they will absolutely like get that going on, certainly in the evening. Again, it might be in the afternoon, but in the evening that can happen. And now they tend to stay up later than their non-royal counterparts because they don't give a shit if you're burning a bunch of candles.
Yeah.
Right? Like they've got money for keeping the fire going, for keeping the candles on, and so they can stay up late and party.
Yeah.
Right? So that is something that is going on there. And then eventually you go off to bed and shtup your wife. Certainly we know Charles was really into this. He's got like 8 million wives. He's got a bunch of children, all the men of which suck. But like, so that like there is also rather a lot of that. Now, you might also, if you are a less religiously inclined guy than Charles, like go shag your mistress or whatever. If you are one of the people who's kind of like at court, you're certainly like making eyes at your, affair partner the whole time. But there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that going on as well.
I would think like it would like after a while like making eyes like you'd get tired of it like God, this needs to end so we can go fucking like get this over with. This like 3.5 hours of blue balls while you're just like
completely
while you're wearing like 40 pounds of cloth. You're just like,
so true. And it's
this
like
sucks.
And you're like, we can't go to bed yet because the king's still here. Fuck.
Yeah.
God damn. Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
So like they are sitting on their throne. And what does it mean? What does it mean for them to hold court? Like, what is that? Just like dealing with affairs of state, or is that also like, hey, we're gonna have fun?
A little bit of both. So, like, you might to hold court, like there it's going to be lots of meetings going on at all times, but that's not holding court, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you are probably having meetings within like your privy chamber, or
Right.
within like whatever like your kind of personal rooms are most of the
Mm-hmm.
time. Holding court means that you're receiving petitions and visitors,
Mm.
more
Okay.
specifically. So you might hear from the small folk who are like, "Could you please oppress us a little bit less?" And you'll be
Mm-hmm.
like, "No."
Nope.
Like you will receive dignitaries from other courts,
Mm.
um, or indeed like just random visitors. Like this is how you get Cooler de Rienzo up from
Yeah.
Rome. He shows up to Charles and is like, "I think you should move back to Rome." And Charles is like, "You're arrested." And like
Shut up.
things of that nature. Like, is Rome not on fire right now? Well, I mean, no, it's
Mm-hmm.
on fire. But what? If shut up, get
Yeah.
out of here.
No, you don't get it. No. No. Okay, so they're holding court, and we've talked about the retainers, but like, how many of these people? Because I mean, there's like everyone from like the groom of the stool,
Mm-hmm.
and like the I don't know, the Secretary of Defense or whatever the
Mm-hmm,
fuck they were
mm-hmm,
called.
mm-hmm.
And then I mean, you've also got like just hundreds of people running the kitchens and shit like
Oh
that.
god, yeah, it's like a huge fucking staff. A lot of the times, in terms of the staff of the actual castle, that is your wife's business, and and more specifically, like she's gonna have staff in order to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I thought this was something that was good in the original Game of Thrones, like in the first series, like after like Robert leaves Winterfell, and like their Master of Coin goes up to
Yeah.
Caitlyn, and it's like, "Do you want to know what that just cost us?" And she's like, "Fuck." Like, and that is
Yeah.
what how it would shake down, is that women are in charge of the general day-to-day running of the house. So there's going to be someone at all times who's just like keeping on top of what the books are,
Mm-hmm.
and like that is like down to, this is how many loaves of bread we have, this is how much we ate, this is what it like cost to keep the horses up, this is what who we invited, this is how many people were at dinner. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's really down to minutia levels in terms of how these things are presented to queens,
Mm-hmm.
and that's certainly something that they look after. Now you again could be a real shit queen. Like you could be super like hands off and be like, "Yeah, I don't care about this at all," and just kind of like let your cellarer deal with it or whatever. But that is certainly something that happens. Now, the king, on the other hand, it's like his guys, especially in the later medieval period, you start having guys that have more specific and delineated roles. Like
Mm-hmm.
before, it's just kind of like your hangers on, your retainers, right?
Yeah.
And if you've got a guy, you like him. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's got a title
Mm-hmm.
and a very specific role. And it's kind of like the French who come up with this first, which is unsurprising because they've got like one of the most elaborate courts that there is,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the French are kind of the ones who come up with the whole like, yeah, I'm the legal guy, I'm the army
Mm-hmm.
guy, like, and having these as like dedicated roles where it's got a title and the king puts you up to it, right? You will also have other things going on for yourself because you don't get one of these roles unless you're also nobility. So sometimes you've got your own land to run.
Mm.
So you might be back at your other castle once in a while. Like they're not necessarily going to be there all the goddamn time, but they're going to be there often,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the deal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So like if you who has to stay like because it can't be every single person who's working in the castle has to
Mm-hmm.
like cut or the palace has to come and like give the king or give someone something like in the court like and they like scuttle like back to wherever they go like
Mm-hmm.
but who is required to just stay there until the king gets like until the king decides it's over.
So you're gonna have people who you're gonna have kind of two sorts, right?
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna have the ones that are really high up, and these are often like your brothers or whatever.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna be hanging out, like waiting to hear from what you need, like from you what you need. But there's also going to be like the people who are doing all the fucking work around here, who follow you around. So you probably have a dedicated guy who looks after your stuff, who will be kind of like a chief of staff, or like you're gonna have kind of like your own sort of grooms person who follows you around to do various things, and you will send him away when you are done, right?
Right.
Oftentimes you'll have a scribe.
Yeah.
That's gonna be someone who's following you around all the time, because a lot of these motherfuckers can't write.
Yeah.
Writing's hard. I don't know if you've ever tried to write with a quill, but it's really fucking difficult. So you might be literate, but you might not actually be able to write yourself, and that's especially common with guys like this. So oftentimes you have a scribe around, and even if you can write, it's often easier just for people to dictate or say, like, take this down.
Yeah.
Kind of a deal. And that is someone who's probably going to be around you rather a lot. So, it's just kind of like the equivalent of like a butler.
Yeah.
In the early modern period, or indeed like modern period, just like kind of having a dude in the room to like pour wine for you if you want. You're going to have a lot of those guys.
Yeah, I don't feel sorry for these people, because I mean, look at how their lives were built on the backs of others.
Yeah.
But I do gotta say, as someone who just like sometimes I need like 20 or 30 minutes or an hour of just like being alone, like this would drive me barking mad in like 3 days.
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
like fine, I can handle absolute power or whatever, but like the fact that you people won't leave me alone for 30 goddamn seconds, I can't just go like smoke a joint or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Stop.
No phone time, no screen time, right?
I don't need you near me. I don't want it. Just like Yeah,
and you have so many more guys, right? Like you probably have a
Yes.
confessor.
Yeah.
Like who's like your priest.
Yeah.
Like you
And
got
don't get me wrong. Like, I love my boys. I love my girls. Love my homies. But like sometimes you just need to like not. Just not. And this is like no.
Yeah.
You get no. Yeah. So like, I mean, this seems like a thing that was happening pretty frequently. So like, what were the consequences? Like, I mean, because we always, like, we look at these kings or queens and be like, well, I would do things differently. But like, what were the social and, political consequences of like bucking the expectations and not doing what the expected thing was?
This really all depends on how much power you have.
Yeah.
Right. So we see this a lot, particularly from emperors.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Because like they're the ones who are like best at being like, get fucked. Because like, what are you going to do, homie? Right. So we see this from Louis the Bavarian, who precedes Charles IV, who's like, I've excommunicated the Pope. And the Pope is like, no, you did. I excommunicated you.
It doesn't work like that. You can't excommunicate me. He's like, la, la, la. I can't hear you because I have soldiers.
And I made a new Pope.
Yep.
And it's got blackjack and hookers, etc.
Yep.
But like, so he's able to do those things just because like he's powerful enough that there isn't much of a way to come at him. And these are plot points in The Name of the Rose. Join us tomorrow for our discussion about that, right? But then also we certainly see this from Frederick II, right?
Yeah.
And Frederick II is just wilding out, doing like having a bath. And like going falconing, and doing whatever it is he wants, and ignoring letters from the Pope who say go on crusade, and he's like, oh yeah, man, any minute.
Doing it tomorrow, totally.
Okay.
Get everything ready. Yep.
You also see this like real bad rulership from Charles's fucking dad, like John the Foreigner. He sucked. Like all he did all day was tournament. Like he just went to other people's houses. Like, stayed there, ate their food, went on tournament, and was like, oh, yeah, here's some money because Bohemia is my ATM. Yeah. And I just, like, fucking get stuff out of that. And all he did was, like, go around carousing, right? Yeah. That motherfucker didn't rule shit.
Yeah.
Like, he would occasionally go on military campaigns in order to secure various castles so that he could, like, hang out there and go to tournaments. Like, he didn't do shit. And it's possible to do that. Is it to the great detriment of your family? Yeah. Like, that's how you get your queen to rebel against you. You know, that's how you, like, he's fucking lucky that his son didn't suck, right? Because, like, well, I mean, like he would care, he was dead or whatever. But, you know, it took a lot of fucking work to undo all of the harm that he did. So you can just get a bad king and, like, no one's really going to do very much about it, right? Because, like, what can you do? You can absolutely foment rebellion, which people have done. But once that is, like, out of the way, it depends. And sometimes people like it when you have ineffectual kings because, like, the nobility will take advantage.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and they'll be like, okay, great, well, now I'm the king, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a deal. So it really depends, because sometimes there's not shit that anybody can do. Like, you could be Henry II and be like, this is my girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
She lives with me now.
Yep.
So that's, everybody say hi, Rosamund. Hi, Rosamund. Yeah. Right? And it's like, what did anybody do? They didn't do anything. They were like, you know who's a real slut? Eleanor of Aquitaine. She's like,
what a skank.
Yeah, no, right? Yeah. And they're like, okay, cool. So, you know,
and then like Eleanor of Aquitaine's like cousin has to be like, yeah, I gotta go. I don't want to get my head chopped off.
Yeah, exactly, right? So it's like, you can really get away with things if you've got rather a lot of power. But that also requires that you keep people sweet.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have to be able to maintain that particularized balance because certainly, you know, Henry II was constantly fighting off his sons who wanted to start shit. You know, you could be Isabella the She-Wolf and be like, yeah, maybe I killed my husband anyway. Like, here's my boyfriend. You know, like, I'm doing X, Y, Z. And while she was in the ascendancy, no one could do anything. And it's like until her son took over.
Yeah.
And then he basically puts her on house arrest, but, you know, he puts her on house arrest in a pretty nice little castle. So, like,
yeah,
whatever, right? So it just, a lot of it is about social capital. And you can get around these things as a result of that. But the thing is, there's always going to be some kind of power vacuum that is created by that. And it just depends. Is what do people see as being in their best interests? If you're going to be a real fucking dick, you have either got to have a really tight grip on power or a completely loose one, essentially, that people see themselves as being able to take advantage of. And they're like, well, this situation kind of works out for me, so I'm not going to rock the boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, interesting.
You can get excommunicated, though, and that can cause real problems for you.
Yeah.
You know? And some people really believe in it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think through the Middle Ages, like I don't know that they all didn't believe in it fully, but like, I think it was definitely like more of a real belief thing. I think in the early modern period, it starts to become superstition for a lot of them, especially like you could tell, like, especially around the Reformation, because they're like, well, this was cheaper than the other one. Like, you know, like if you have like a real quandary about your immortal soul, like, you're not going to worry about, you know, a cheaper religion or whatever. But you know,
yeah, completely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we've talked about Charles. He was a hands-on ruler. You know, obviously this is still built on the backs of like the downtrodden and, obviously, you know, cruelties across the board and everything. But like, that's kind of what you have on the one hand of like a ruler who is involved and, you know, just wants to get stuff done, and you know, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but they're like trying at least. So what about the other hand? Like, let's say like you have a ruler who just is like a complete dilettante, doesn't care, you know, he's out carousing all the time, he's never holding court, he's hunting every day, whatever, he's playing ball or whatever with his boys. Who is picking up that slack? Because, like, you know, somebody has to be there to hear the peasants' petition. Somebody has to, like, who is doing that?
So, again, here, John is a great example, Charles's father. And the answer is the nobility on a smaller level. So the nobility take the opportunity while John is away to just say, "Oh, I think you'll find that falls under my remit. That falls under my remit. That falls under my remit." But what falls under their remit, according to them, is usually like anything where money
Yeah.
like gets involved, right? So they're like, yeah, ooh, those taxes, they come right here. Yep.
Yep.
Like escape property, like property where there's no one to inherit. Oh, yeah, I think you'll find that it belongs to me, right?
Yeah.
They don't do the shit like making sure there aren't bandits on the roads.
Yeah.
They don't do shit like, especially like it becomes a problem for cities and towns, which are usually royal in character. Well, like who's making sure the wall gets rebuilt?
Yeah.
Right? Like, the mayor can say, oh, we need to do that, but then you've got to like raise funds. That's usually something you would kind of go talk to a king about, right? What John is very good at doing is making sure that taxes from the places that he's allowed to draw taxes from get to him. Right, so like his tax guys are still super active, and they're going to be going out to Kutnora and places like that, and making sure that like they know what the silver production of the mines is, and that they're getting their cut, and then they're sending that on. I know. Okay, so we have to be careful with the sources around here because everyone fucking hates John, right? Like, and every single source is like John sucks. I hate John. Like John is pig dog. And there's basically like no sources that are like this guy's good, but some noble sources are like, well, it's kind of sweet when the nobles are ruling. Am I right? Am I right? Everyone who's getting paid by nobles to write this, like, I think that's pretty good. And then when Charles shows up, obviously all of his sources are like, oh God, the kingdom, it was in ruins, it was tattered. And then Charles renewed it all and it became great again, right? And like, so that's probably true to an extent, but we just have to be kind of careful, right? Because these are all things that are written specifically to aggrandize Charles. And like, it's something that Charles writes about himself. He's like, yeah, when I got back to Prague, like it was shit.
Yeah.
And like, here's my thing. Prague was probably fine. Probably his fancy lad accommodations sucked. Like, we know the castle was falling apart. It hadn't had any kind of like major works for like 75 years or so. John was never home. So like, why would he care like what the fuck was going on with the castle? And also like, John kind of needs to not be home because all the nobility hated him. So you're not going to go like stay in the dilapidated castle when you could just ponce around Europe eating free meals, right? Like that's not what you're gonna do. So he kind of like lets the castle fall into the ground, but he is gonna make sure that any form of governing that specifically is about him getting money takes over. So yeah, we just need to be super, super careful when we read sources like this because obviously they're all telling us a story for a particular reason. I think it's safe to say the castle was really dilapidated. It's safe to say that there were problems on the roads. We know that there were problems on the road and things were unsafe. It's definitely safe to say that the nobles had taken a lot of advantage and like were not always ruling well, right? Because they were like, woohoo, now it's my turn to do some oppression. We know all of these things to be true, but these things were able to happen very specifically because John sucked, and he wasn't interesting. There's a lot of, in order to rule well, there's a lot of work that is kind of ongoing, and you can kind of leave in other situations if you, for example, get on well with your wife and she didn't attempt to lead a rebellion against you. You could like leave and then she would just rule, right? But John had very specifically limited Elzbieta's power because of the whole attempting to depose him and put Charles in charge thing, right? So like that exists. When Richard the Lionheart decided that he was going to go on crusade, he was like, Mom, and also like this council of like 5 people are going to be looking after the governing. So he put someone in charge that he knew how to rule. And also, like, kind of set up a system of checks and balances and a group of people who would discuss things while he was gone. And that's the good version. But even if we accept this as kind of like a good version, it's the stuff that folktales are made of, right? Because, like, Robin Hood, a lot of the legends there hinge on the fact that, like, Richard isn't there. And people take advantage
Yeah.
of it and things have gotten out of hand, right? So there's always this understanding that the ideal is some kind of godly or religious ruler who is going to be looking in on things and who has a conscience,
Yeah.
which they don't all have.
Yeah.
And indeed, most of them don't.
Yeah. Yeah, you get very few rulers who are hands-on and actually good at it, actually, competent enough to do the hands-on thing, and then after that, it's, you get a mix of like, they tried, but they sucked at it, they didn't try, and it made it worse, they were a warrior, so, it was, a whole different thing, yeah. So yeah, that is like the court of Charles the Fourth. That is a late medieval or late medieval court. Opulent. You got dozens of retainers, hundreds of servants. The whole deal. People coming in and out. The emperor just has so much fucking gout. It's everybody loves the gout. But
Yeah.
and we talked about like the like the lazy or hands-off ruler, whatever you want to call it. But let's say that you have one where a king or emperor is away on war, like they're fighting another lord, or they're on crusade or something. So it's not something where they've just like they're derelict of duty. It's they've delegated it. So who is going to be like in charge? Who's going to be the regent in charge? Is it going to be the queen or the empress, or is it going to be like a higher up noble? Who are we talking about?
You are usually going to be talking about the queen or the empress because most of your higher up nobles are going to go with you.
Yep, that's a good point.
Like, unless you've got a particularly elderly and like thoughtful noble where you might be like, you're going to stay with the queen.
Yeah.
And you're gonna see to this shit because like you're not gonna be any help to us on the battlefield and like so
I could still fight. No, you're blind. Just stay here for the love of God.
and John is like, nope. Battle of Cressy, here I come. And then everyone was glad because it was good that John died. So like it's one of these things where it's usually your wife in most instances, which is where John really fucked up because since he didn't get on with his wife. But there will be instances where if someone is particularly good, you're like, not you. Yeah. You're like you are staying home. Like I mean, especially with Crusade, that can be like a real thing. But unfortunately, like because Crusade is such an awesome time, all your boys usually want to go with you.
Yeah.
It's like lads, let's get fucking down. Like, so that is going to be like a kind of like a sticking issue and it really depends. But you usually leave someone related to you.
Yeah.
As well, because people who are related to you are less likely to like completely fuck over the entire family on this one. So that's like a really careful and considered point to make. But yeah, it's usually the wives.
Yeah.
Just straight up.
Yep. Yeah.
Priests.
Yeah,
I guess the other thing too here is like priests you trust. So this is like a big deal, like in terms of the investiture controversy. So in terms of like why kings want to invest bishops, there's any number of reasons why they want to have more hands on the reign of power. But one of the reasons is, your archbishop is someone that can really look in on things for you while you're gone if you trust them.
Yeah.
Right? Because they can't go to war. They got to be doing church shit. But if that's somebody that the Pope has just put in and you don't know who the fuck they are, or they're from one of the like rival dynasties or rival noble families, you are not going to be able to have them perform this function. So like, that's why there's a lot of stress around that.
Yeah, it seems incredibly boring, but also like it's definitely like a Gilded Cage type thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Seems
like to steal a line from Justin, and this is kind of like about our royal family that we still have here for some fucking reason. But it's like they have absolutely like the most privilege that it's possible to have, but they have no freedom.
Yeah.
No, and that's just kind of like what it comes down to is that you have behaviors that you can have, but certain things are just kind of like set out for you in stone, and that is going to be how it is.
Yeah. Yeah, they well, they deserve it. But yeah,
I hope
it's
they're unhappy. You can stop
yeah,
at any
I
time.
hope I hope all of them are unhappy. You could pull yourself out of this. You can abdicate and go live in, I don't know, wherever. Avignon or Rome or what, Borneo, wherever the fuck you want to go.
Get a fucking job.
Yeah, get a fucking job. Be like the last emperor of China. Get rehabilitated, get a job as a groundskeeper and gardener, and live the rest of your life talking about how much you love communism.
Goddamn right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is about going to do it for us today here on A Day in the Life of the Noble, or I'm sorry, Day in the Life of a Royal. It's a lot of sitting around, a lot of eating opulent food with too much, way too many and way too weirdly combined spices in it. And a bunch of people groveling on you hand and foot. But yeah, also seems nice because you didn't have to do anything. So yeah, next time we're going to finish up our Day in the Life series. We're going to talk about a day in the life of a monk. You might think, well, you're doing the Name of the Rose series, which is true, but it's definitely not really a day in the life thing. Cause
there's a lot less murder.
Somehow there was a lot less murder throughout history, but yeah, it's we'll talk about the day in the life of a clergyman. We'll kind of talk about like a normal like parish priest, and then go up to maybe like an archbishop or something like that, just to get a look at all of it. And yeah, and that'll finish up our Day in the Life series. But yeah, Eleanor, what's going on with you?
I made a new website for myself. This is eleanoryanaga.com, which I will update when I have thingies that you can click on. So if you're ever like, I wonder what that bitch is up to, well, like you can go check that out. It was very stressful. Also, when I say I made this website, I mean Justin made this website and rubbed his temples while I said things in a confused manner. So like shout out to my long-suffering boyfriend. So yeah, that is that. You can of course check out me on the socials at Going Medieval. I have got my podcast where I don't swear, Gone Medieval. I've actually got like a very long deep dive on Charles IV coming up, so I'll shout that out when it happens.
Nice.
Where it's like, if you just want to hear me talk about Charles IV unimpeded for 45 minutes, I got you covered. But then, yeah, like otherwise, check out my book, The Once and Future Sex. And of course, if you haven't seen the Meet the Normans series on History Hit, I'd appreciate it if you would check that out.
Yep. And yeah, you can find my stuff, Luke is Amazing, on the socials. You can find my other show, People's History of the Old Republic, wherever you're listening to this. It's about Star Wars. So yeah, check that out if you want to hear me talk some more. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye!